All in Sports Network. We love sports.
It is Thursday, December 5th, and it is the day after National Signing Day. Still some big-time major recruits to announce their decision out into the world, and Jake and I are going to give you kind of a recap, a quick synopsis on our feelings on how signing day went for Texas, who currently holds, at the end of the initial day, the number one recruiting class in the country, just over Georgia, and there's one recruit that will probably determine who ends up with that number one spot to finish at least the initial round of recruiting. And so we'll give a recap on kind of how the day went yesterday, how a couple of actually really only one recruit didn't go Texas's way, but for the most part, everything went as expected for Texas. And then we'll give a quick rundown on predictions of championship weekend coming up starting tomorrow with the Mountain West Conference and the American Athletic Conference, which do have playoff implications. Again, a lot of these games all having postseason implications to them. And we will go through Saturday's list, except for the SEC Championship. We will not touch or predict the Texas-Georgia game. That will be saved for Friday's episode, where it will solely be talked about Texas-Georgia SEC Championship weekend in Atlanta, Georgia. So, Jake, let's get into it. I'm Tanner Carlson. That's Jake Jimerson. This is your daily fix for all things Texas Longhorns right here on All In Horns, brought to you by Rogue Sports Network. And, Jake, how's it going? How'd you like recruiting? How was signing day? It was an exciting day and a fun day. This has just been a hot streak to be a Texas Longhorn.
Yeah, well, first off, I can't imagine being a coach right now. My head is spinning from this week, just trying to do my job, my real job, while also keeping up with all the recruiting, while also trying to remember that Texas plays for an SEC title game this weekend. And also, folks, the portal opens up here in just a few days.
Yeah.
And Texas is going to lose some guys in this first portal, just like they did last year, where they lost a handful of guys to the portal before the playoffs started. I doubt it'll be any actual contributors, but I guarantee you there'll be some names in there and probably one or two that you won't like to see. And that's just kind of how you just kind of have to put it in your mind now that that's how college football is. But being a college football coach just sounds miserable. I don't care about all the money. If you are really good, you're almost punished more in the sense of just everything stacks on top of each other to happen at once. Oh, yeah. And if you're Sarkeesian right now,
you would think college football would kind of make this a little bit more of a like spread out seasonal thing of where like regular season, conference championship, playoff, signing day, transfer portal, where it's all kind of, you can focus your attention on it. But no, they don't do that. They just throw it to you all at once.
You would think, but then you realize it's the NCAA and they don't think.
No,
they're not real good at that. But I mean, if you're Sarkeesian, you're prepping for an SEC championship first and foremost. You also just spend a bunch of time getting a key flip in Cade Phillips from LSU. Really talented 5-star in some sites, high 4-star in others. Keep in mind, all these stars aren't necessarily set in stone yet. There are still senior season tape to evaluate for a lot of these sites, and they will make final adjustments. And so they got that flip. They were trying to flip Fasusi. That did not happen, obviously. And now they're trying to get Justice Terry, not a flip, but would feel like a flip.
Yeah.
Because he's in Georgia. He is heavily favored to go to Georgia, but Texas is surging, and Justice Terry has the most leverage in the history of college football as a recruit, because it is the NIL era, and he holds who gets the number one class in his hands. And he is a big time come in freshman season, which is rare as a defensive tackle, and play right away, whether that be Georgia or Texas, which tells you how impressive of a prospect he is.
100%, Jake. It came after the announcement this morning from 5-star athlete Michael Terry that Texas jumped Georgia to take over that number one recruiting spot, especially via 24/7 Sports. And it's not every single recruiting source that has Texas the number one, but the majority of them do have Texas as the number one recruiting class so far. That came on the backs of signing 4 5-stars, safety Jonah Williams from Ball High School out of Galveston, 8th highest rated recruit in Texas Longhorn history. So that's a big name. Khalik Lockett, another 5-star wide receiver. Defensive end Lance Jackson. He is rated as a high 4-star, low 5-star in some rankings, depending on where you're looking. Lance Jackson from Pleasant Grove, Jake. He's the brother of Arkansas defensive end Landon Jackson, who is projected to be a first, second round guy type guy. This dude throws 95 on the mound in the diamond. Now, he is solely focused on football. He's not going to go play baseball for the University of Texas. He could also get drafted from the MLB. We're talking that type of athlete at defensive end. This guy is going to be an incredible addition to that defensive line with Colin Simmons and others. The edge work that Texas has put in, especially with Kenny Baker, it's about to be scary hours for some quarterbacks in the SEC.
Yeah, and did pick up some key defensive tackle recruits. A lot of that was retention, which props to this coaching staff to not have a single one of their verbal commits flip when just about every other team did. And they, believe me, Oregon was trying. Oregon was coming in and trying, and Florida as well.
In Miami.
Oregon, Miami, and Florida were all just trying to drop bags on recruits. Obviously, Miami ended up getting Wiley, the kind of middle to low 4-star linebacker. Mm-hmm. Texas feels fine. They have good depth, not a lot, but
they did like him a lot.
Depth. They did like him. I go watch Bo Barnes, go watch his tape. Number 1 linebacker in the class. And he is going to be special on the 40 acres. And so just overall, a really good day. And you talk about Lance Jackson. I've talked about him on here a few times, and I'm really high on him. I think he's a apparent 5-star. If you look at him compared to Landon Jackson, I believe Landon Jackson was a 5-star. Lance Jackson is a much better player. Yeah. He is much more filled out and ready to go as well, body type wise. And he will be a better prospect as well. I think he's going to be a certified stud, probably get a little playing time next year, but by his second year, he's going to be impossible to keep off the field.
Texas did manage to make 2 flips. You already mentioned the high 4-star, maybe low grade 5-star, depending on where you're looking, at a defensive back, Cade Phillips from LSU. He's from Hightower High School in Missouri City, Texas. Jake, the Houston area was a big target for Texas. Sark had mentioned in the past how they kind of get their butt kicks every year in the Houston area. And what does he not only do with his football team whenever he sees a lap of talent? He goes and attacks it. Now he's attacking the recruiting side of things and saying, we should own the entire state of Texas. I don't care if LSU is geographically closer to the Houston area. We should own Houston as well. A very good class coming out of the Houston area for Texas, including Cade Phillips. Also an Florida State flip. We talked about it multiple times. Myron Charles, he'd been teasing Texas. He ended up signing today. Defensive tackle who was originally committed to Florida State. Florida State obviously having the season that they had. He is now going to be a Texas Longhorn.
Florida was pushing hard for him at the end as well, and Texas was able to hold them off on him and Jamie French.
Yeah,
they were actually the first 2 to send in their letters of intent, which I thought kind of sent a message.
Yeah,
because they were 2 a lot of people were worried about.
Jamie French, saw an interview with him today. Awesome kid. I mean, this dude is super cool. He's going to be a fan favorite. He's probably he might be one of the more perfect recruits in terms of the NIL era. He's going to get a lot of looks, especially if he's the player that his personality is. But Jamie French was a great get, a 4-star wide receiver. You talked about Bo Barnes, linebacker out of Skyline High School. Again, the Dallas area, always kind to Texas. Real quickly, though, going down the list, KJ Lacey. He's 6 foot. He's quarterback. KJ Lacey, 4-star out of Saraland High School in Alabama. Out-of-state commit. 6 foot, 175 pounds. Smaller guy, multi-sport athlete. but played a similar scheme in high school as kind of what he's going to be playing under Sark's scheme, and shows the ability to kind of make every single throw. I think he was overlooked and actually set a lot of state high school records in the state of Alabama. But a similar recruiting path to kind of a Trey Owens was overlooked in this class by quarterbacks. Sark likes finding the diamonds in the roughs, but guys that have ultimate ability that he feels that he can coach up and will succeed in his offense. KJ Lacey is that type of guy. If we ever see KJ Lacey hit the field, I don't know, to be 100% honest. Not with Arch Manning, not with Trey Owens, but it's likely that we will. But you also have Diadell coming in next year's recruiting class, and he's a 5-star quarterback. So no shortage of incoming talent at the quarterback position, despite the talent that's already there for Texas.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty high on Trey Owens, and I think Trey Owens is going to have his hands full trying to keep him off from taking his job whenever it comes that time. This is looking way in the future, but he's also a winner in high school. I think his record's 31-2 as a starter. I've watched, just go look up his highlights and his tape on YouTube, and you're going to have a pretty fun time, and you're going to feel really high on him. And also, we haven't even hardly talked about him, Jonah Williams. He is going to play baseball for Texas. He is one of the best baseball recruits in the country. He could go pro right now if he wanted to. He wants to play college ball, and Schloss is a big reason that they got him.
Yeah.
Because originally he was going to go to A&M and play both, and then Texas stole Schlossnagle, stole a SEC title spot from A&M, and then also stole probably would have been their number one recruit in the class.
Would have been their number one recruit.
Yeah, again, just giving little brother a little bit of a noogie, just saying, hey, we're back, little bro. But this is this is a very good class for Sarkisian. Maybe, I don't want to say his best class yet, because that first class when he came in, offensive line wise, really set the tone for what Texas is now. And I know some people look at it and go, what? They missed out in Fasusi. They don't have a 5-star offensive lineman. First off, how spoiled have we gotten so quickly? Second off, trust this staff's evaluation process, especially when it comes to Kyle Flood looking at offensive linemen and offering a lot of these guys early. They didn't settle for these linemen. These linemen have been in the class for a long time, just like they were high on Gooseby, and they offered him really early on, got him on, and now you see why. And I trust that they realize that if you bring in a 5-star, right, in today's era of college football, 5 stars want to play within 2 years at worst. If you bring in Fasusi, he's not going to play until year 3 right now. He's not Kelvin Banks. He's not Cam Williams. He's not, and Cam Williams didn't play right away, and he wasn't a 5-star. Cam Williams is actually also a 3-star on some sites, 4-star on others. And now look at him. And so Texas is looking at as in, they'll probably hit the portal for a guy or two, but they pretty much have a full 5 ready to replace this full 5 right now that they're very high on. And so I'm very high on the offensive linemen and the defensive tackles they got in this class. That said, I will feel incredible if they could get Justice Terry in, because they are light on the defensive tackles. I think that would probably be the one complaint, but that kind of happens when you have to bring in a new defensive lineman coach who also didn't come from the college ranks. He came from the NFL, obviously.
And Jake, 2 guys I also want to touch on before we go into our conference championship predictions. Tight end from Houston, Texas, Nick Townsend. I think this dude is exciting. He's a stud. Might be my pet cat, if you will. I mean, this dude is just one of my. I'm gonna keep my ears and eyes peeled for the Townsend name, whether that come in spring camp, spring game, the white-orange game, whatever it is. But the dude can outrun DBs as a tight end. Would probably be one of the best linebackers in the country if he decided to play defense. It was a special teams demon. And if he needs to play some special teams, Sarkisian will gladly and more than willingly put him out there early his freshman year, and he will make plays on the special teams unit. And he can play anywhere and everywhere, but the dude is an all-around athlete, and you're going to add him to a mix of this wide receiver class and the wide receiver class we saw from last year, and a tight end with the ability to stretch the field. Now, he is not a Gunnar Helm. He is a down the field if you want to put a name to it, Kyle Pitts caliber athlete. When it comes to the tight end position, I don't know if you'll see the type of production you saw from Kyle Pitts, but you'll get that caliber of player in terms of his athletic ability.
He's not afraid to block. I would not compare him to Kyle Pitts. I
Okay.
think he's going to fill out some. He is physical. He's not the biggest guy yet.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like in terms of, he would have been one of the best linebackers in the country. And on special teams, he will make plays for you. And I'm not talking about returning the ball. I'm talking about making plays and tackling. Like, he's a physical guy. But I'm just on an athletic standpoint, in terms of his speed and athletic ability, his high point is Kyle Pitts like, but his blocking ability, I don't know. Who, Gunnar Helm, I guess. I don't know. Who do you want to throw out there?
I mean, he's meaner than Gunnar Helm is.
He is. He's aggressive.
Gunnar Helm is really sound in blocking, but I think he has a higher upside than Helm in blocking. I'm just talking specifically in blocking, just because he is very willing. He likes to hit people, and then but the only downside with Townsend is 20 of 24 of these recruits are going to be early enrollees. Townsend is not.
And
he is
one of the 4 that is
typically, if you aren't an early enrollee, you aren't seeing the field much your freshman year. They have Jordan Washington, who's going to be an absolute stud at tight end, ready to fill in next year. I think he'll play next year, so that could be part of it. And obviously, you have to graduate early, so there's more to it than just I want to enroll early. You have to be ready to do that several years early, kind of on that path. And I don't know why he isn't enrolling early, but that is probably the only downside. Littleton and then the 2 Coleman brothers,
Jordan and Devin.
Yes, those are the other ones who are not enrolling early. Everyone else you see is enrolling early, and that is welcome to the new era of college football. Coaches want these guys to enroll in spring. That is the best way to get on the field early, and it gives you a whole extra 4 or 5 months of being in college, learning the system, being in a strength and conditioning program, not just having to get a booklet from your coach and do it in your high school gym. No, you get the facilities and everything right away.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the big thing to me, is just seeing 20 out of 24 guys are going to be enrolled early.
Incredible. I mean, huge news. Lastly, I want to talk about a 3-star running back, Ricky Stewart, just real quick, out of Chapel Hill, one of 3. I'm sorry. Cedar Hill and Chapel Hill are 2 different places. I apologize. But Ricky Stewart, there's a cool story that I heard from Jerry Hamilton from On Texas Football. He was going to go watch Chapel Hill play. Had heard about Ricky Stewart, Texas' pursuit of him. He was on his way to go see them that week. Ricky Stewart was sick the week leading up in practice and warmups. He was running a fever and throwing up the week of the game, and then went out, played the game, and made it a point to be out at practice, leading his team, leading the offense in drills, being the first one there, last one to leave, and he's just sweating profusely after like 2 reps and just winded and gassed. But just a full football guy, puts football and team ahead of himself as a 3-star running back, and just loves to play. He's a footballer, and that's what it comes down to. And you can't not love a guy that has that mindset. He's a very smooth runner. He's not very herky jerky in terms of his like cuts and jukes and stuff. He's very subtle in his moves, but when he gets to the second level, he's gone. Good luck catching him.
Yeah. And I'll add one more story. This one about Townsend. A&M was pushing really hard for him at the end. He actually visited the A&M Texas game as an A&M visitor. He said after the game, and it was known during the game, he was cheering for Texas. He basically used that as a way to get to that game.
That's awesome.
And
I mean, why would you spend $1,000?
Make you a bigger fan of his.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And he's already my pet cat in this draft or in this recruiting class. So extremely excited about it.
I'll tell you who my pet cat is of this class. Nick Brooks, offensive tackle.
Oh, he's a big boy.
6'7", 345, college football 25. You fully scouted the guy. It's a gym, +5 overall. That's Nick Brooks. Be ready to hear that name here in 2-3 years. Whenever he gets his chance, it's going to be like a Gooseby, where he just comes in, someone gets hurt or something, he gets thrusted in a little earlier than expected. Not his freshman year. He'll need to develop a little, get some speed and athleticism going. but he's going to come in, and then all of a sudden he's just going to be dominant, and I'm
Yeah.
very excited about him.
Very much so, Jake. One last thing, 15 players from Texas, 6 from the Houston region. We touched on that. 5 in the Dallas area, 7 out of state, all in SEC country, which would be Alabama, Georgia. The only guy who was not in SEC country was Josiah Sharma from California. But everybody else from the Florida, Louisiana, Georgia, Alabama range, and in Texas. And so Texas kind of doing a clean sweep, if you will, through the SEC of getting some of their guys, top guys, taken away from teams like Georgia and Alabama, Auburn, who were recruiting these guys, LSU, Cade Phillips. And so anyway, that's kind of a bow on the recap, if you will, for National Signing Day. Justice Terry will be announcing his commitment. If you're watching this, when this episode drops at noon, 1 o'clock-ish range, we are expected to hear from Justice Terry around that 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock range on Friday. And so, or on Thursday, I bet, or is it Friday or Thursday?
It's Friday. He announced
it is Friday. Okay. So on Friday. Anyway, kind of set your alarm, be ready for that announcement. He will change the tide of this entire recruiting class, whether that be for Georgia or for Texas. And what a weekend for Texas, Georgia, a rematch in the SEC championship game. And now you're fighting for one of the top recruits in the country to get the number 1 recruiting class in the country in 2024. Any last sentiments, any last thoughts on this recruiting class that you want to talk about, Jake?
Just one last thing. I think it was 6 out of the top 13 in Texas that Texas got.
That is the flagship state.
Not what Tom Herman and Charlie Strong did. If you go back, you talked about how Dallas has been good to Texas. Dallas has been good to Texas since Sarkisian came back or came in, and then that's when Dallas kind of came back into the fold. Herman had
it was Mac Brown.
Dallas.
It was Mac Brown.
Yes, that's why I say they came back.
They came back. Yeah, Mac Brown, a little bit of a hiatus, came back after Sark took over. So, all right, Jake, let's go ahead and move forward and get into conference championship week. We will not be discussing or predicting the Texas-Georgia game right now, but we are going to dive in to this weekend's game, starting on the Friday night games in the Mountain West and in the American Athletic Conference, starting with the Mountain West at Boise. Jake, these G5 conferences, they play home games to the team, to the 1 seed, if you will, gets a home game. And so this will be played at Boise State at Albertson Stadium. And number 20, UNLV, 4-point dogs at number 10, Boise State. I do believe the winner of this game will get the G5 spot in the college football playoffs. Over under set at 58.5. What's your take on it?
I got UNLV. I think this is where the madness kind of starts. I think they're going to kick out Boise State, and then Big 12 will get their precious bye week. Brett Yormark, the clown himself, was crying about it just the other day, and so I think he still has a little bit of tears from having to hand over the trophy to Sarkisian. But yeah, I think Boise State has been playing a little bit worse as the season has gone along. They flirted with some losses here and there towards the end of the season. And I think UNLV has kind of been catching their stride. And I more than anything, it's just a gut feeling. I would feel stronger about it if it was on a neutral field.
Yeah.
It's on that blue field for Boise State where they do not lose often, but I'm still just going to roll the dice, if you will, for the team from Las Vegas.
Wow.
And say that they're going to pull out the upset win and earn a berth to the playoffs.
It's hard to beat a team twice, Jake, regardless if that first win was on the road and now you're playing them at home. But I do think the environment in terms of the weather is going to play a factor. It's going to be cold. Boise State leans on Ashton Genty. I think a strong running game is pivotal in cold weather games, and the ability to do that is in favor of Boise State. I do like UNLV. However, I like Boise State to win this game. I would be very tempted to take that 4-point underdog spread for UNLV to cover, but I'll take Boise State to win the game. So you and I already split the difference here in the first opening game of conference championship week. Let's go ahead and move along to Tulane, 5-point favorites over number 21 Army. Jake, this is the first time that a conference championship game will be hosted at West Point, one of the most historic and just one of the greatest venues in all of college football.
Yeah, it's a really cool story, and it's been fun to kind of have a reason to watch Army and Navy games. I just can't find a reason to pick them to beat Tulane based off when I've watched them play. I trash talk Tulane a little bit, but that's in the standpoint of having them as a top 20 team. I do think they're going to win this game. I like them to cover the spread. I would love to pick Army. I know you're probably going to pick Army because you've rolled with Army and Navy regardless.
I am. You better believe it.
Got beat by Notre Dame, but I think
Tulane
I did
take Notre Dame
by a couple possessions.
I did take Notre Dame to beat Army. I unfortunately picked Navy to beat Notre Dame, and that was wrong. But I am going to take Army in this game. I think, again, weather is going to play a factor. Tulane they're comfortable in a dome. I think it's going to be cold. And West Point, I think that is going to play a factor. And I think that big boy offensive line run game for Army, same formula that Boise State's going to have over UNLV. I think it's going to play a huge factor for Army to win this one as well. Also, Jake, the Joe Moore Award, while I am on the subject, announced their top 3 finalists, Army being one of the finalists for the best offensive line group in the country, Oregon being the second finalist, and the University of Texas being the third finalist for the best offensive line group, not offensive player, offensive line men, but offensive line group as a whole. Texas, Oregon, and Army announced as the finalists. That's a pretty cool thing, especially for Army to even be mentioned in the likes of those other 2 programs. So anyway, moving right along to Saturday's games, the Big 12 championship being played at AT&T Stadium. Winner, again, will advance and get a spot in the college football playoffs. Now, where they will get that spot, that is yet to be seen. That remains to be seen. Number 16, Iowa State, playing number 15, Arizona State, a possible first-time conference championship as their first year in the conference for Arizona State. They are 2-point favorites with a 50.5-point over-under.
I'm going to go with Arizona State. I like the Sun Devils in this one. Iowa State they played their best football the first 7 or 8 weeks of the season. They haven't since. I feel like Arizona State's done the exact opposite. It's the Big 12, so Iowa State will probably win because I'm saying this. That's just the type of year it's been in the Big 12.
Sure.
But I'm going to take Arizona State. They're too fun of a story. I really want to see them in the playoff, not Iowa State. I like their head coach. He's a fiery young guy. His name's escaping me off the top of my head, but I like Arizona State in this. I'm going to take them to cover. It's a 2-point spread. So that's, at that point, you're just saying they're not going to win by 1.
Yeah. It's a tough
I do
spread
think this is going to be a pretty close game from the start until the finish.
Arizona State has ended their season on a tear. I'm not sure they've won their final games by anything less than 2 or 3 possessions. So I'm actually going to take Arizona State in this game. I'm going to take it. I guess that's not true. They had BYU almost had that Hail Mary after they had to clear the field, and from the pre-storm storming of the field, they had to take 30 minutes to get off the field. They had a Hail Mary with 1 second left, almost got it. It caught at the 2-yard line, would have lost the game if that was the case. But I am going to take Arizona State in this game, Jake, first game that you and I agree on. However, I think Arizona State's going to handle Iowa State. I think they're going to win by 2 or 3 scores.
Yeah, I could see that. The Big 12, I can see anything happening.
This could be Colorado
55-0.
Colorado could win this game. I don't know. So let's go ahead. Another big game, ACC championship game. Now, Jake, this game is going to involve a conversation between you and I when it comes to who is winning this game, who's losing this game, and the implications It may mean both teams are in. It might mean just the winner is in. It might secure a spot for SMU. It might secure a spot just for Clemson, and SMU gets booted from the conference or from the college football playoffs. I don't really know how that is going to play out. However, Clemson is 2.5-point dogs in this game. This will be played in Charlotte, North Carolina, at the Carolina Panthers Stadium. 56.5 points on the over-under. I'm actually probably going to take the under in that game, but I like SMU a lot. I'm really rooting for SMU a lot. I want SMU to win this game a lot. I think Clemson's going to win this game. It's just tailor-made for how this season has gone for the Clemson Tigers to end up in the college football playoffs by winning their conference.
We're gonna disagree again. I'm gonna take SMU to win. I've doubted them for a big chunk of the season, and I feel like they just got better every week. Whereas Clemson has been kind of all over the place. They've
kind of sucked all season, except for whenever they played teams that were ranked in the 100s.
Yes, I mean they looked better, I guess, maybe against South Carolina. I don't know. Their offense looks so bad in that game. It's hard to judge. Also, I just really don't want to see this Clemson team in the playoff. If they lose this, they're not in. I don't think there's really even a discussion to be had there. They're number 17.
No, they're not in if they lose this game.
If they lose, they're out. And so I'm going to take SMU to win. I think we're going to see these newcomers win their conferences.
Do you think that if Clemson wins this game, SMU is still in the playoffs, or do you think that the committee punishes them for going undefeated in conference play, playing in a conference championship game and losing to Clemson? Do you think that they get booted?
They better not, because you can boot Bama out. Bama's the easy one. I'll get on them in a second, but They shouldn't be, because the committee said before the start of the season they are not going to punish teams for playing in their conference title game.
They
better hold true to that, because the only thing the committee has to answer to is themselves. So they set a criteria. They have made that a criteria, or at least said it out loud, which to me makes it a criteria. And you would flat out be punishing SMU for losing their conference title game. If they booted them out for losing this game. Maybe if they lose like 42-0, I could hear a discussion. If it's just an embarrassment,
I could start the discussion if it's TCU Georgia national championship game.
Yeah, I mean, if it's just ugly, then yeah, I could. There is a circumstance where I could understand it, but I just don't think Clemson's going to do that to SMU. Maybe they'll prove me wrong. But I don't think it'll matter, because I think SMU is going to win it and just make sure they get in, because I'm sure their coaches are relaying to their players, do not put this in the hands of a bunch of guys who only care about putting Alabama in the playoffs.
Yep. Yeah, I 100% agree with you. All right, Jake, number 3, Penn State taking on Oregon in the Big 10 conference championship. Oregon, 3.5-point favorites. I was a little surprised that the spread was as low as it was. But 49.5 points on the over-under. I will actually take the under, because I don't think Penn State's going to score enough points, and I think Oregon will handle this game and not need to score 49 points to do it. So I'm going to take Oregon in this game, and I think Oregon's going to pretty much, from opening kickoff, kind of dominate this game, and just the score might not show a 28-point win for Oregon, but I do think it'll if you watch the game, you'll come away seeing that Oregon is far and away the better team, and a decisive victory for the Ducks.
Yeah, I had to double check your work. 3.5 point. I thought maybe there was a 0 missing after the 3. This game is not going to be close. I have said all year I don't want Penn State to be in the playoff. I have now accepted they will be in the playoff. But they're not going to be one of the ones getting a bye. Maybe they make it look closer than it is, but I think Oregon goes into the playoffs undefeated. They were actually my preseason pick to win the national title, so I might as well just roll with them here. And I don't think this is going to be a competitive ball game. I think Oregon wins this by 3-4 scores.
And Oregon will go into the college football playoffs with the worst seed that you could possibly have, which is the number 1 overall seed. So According
Yeah.
to what the College Football Playoff Committee projected tournament schedule looks like, I would not want to be the number one seed and either take on the winner of what was it, Ohio State and Tennessee.
Yeah, no, being the 5 seed is we have talked about how important a bye is with the way that projected the current project, and I know that's not what it's going to end up being, but this has been consistent for a while now. Is it looks better to not have the bye and be a 5th seed, because I would much rather be the 5th seed that's going to be favored to win your first 2 games by 10, 15 points plus than be the 1st seed, get a bye, play in a neutral field against a team that has the same level of talent, if not more than you, as opposed to playing Boise State in a neutral field in the second game after playing Arizona State or a Clemson or a UNLV in my case, obviously with picking them to win. Yeah, I would rather be the 5 seed, just objectively.
Without a doubt. Jake, I wanted to ask you this. Now, the committee has said that they are not going to punish you for losing your conference championship game. I think that mostly means you will not be kicked out of the college football playoffs if you are currently sitting in the college football playoffs. I don't think that necessarily means that your seeding won't change. I think that the rankings will maneuver up and down. Like, say Georgia gets blown out by Texas, you could possibly see Georgia drop 3, 4, 5 spots to a 10, 11 seed. And that would raise up a couple of teams like a Tennessee or an Indiana. You could see Penn State get blown out by Oregon. And they're like, this team is not the 5th team in the country after losing that game. They're going to be pushed down to a 9 or 10 spot. I think you will see situations like that in terms of the ranking. Is that kind of how you feel about it as well?
Yeah, and that's how I feel it should be. The game's still being played. It
still
should matter.
Yeah.
It just shouldn't boot like in I think SMU is the perfect example here, because I think everyone knows Georgia and Texas are safe. Everyone knows that Penn State and Oregon are safe. And then everyone knows that the loser of the Big 12 is not getting in. So it's pretty clear and evident to me that the only team this conversation evolves around is SMU, and I've already said what I think, which is if they lose, they should not be booted out the playoff, unless it is just 63-3. Their quarterback gets hurt, he's going to be out for the rest of the season. Unless it's some crazy circumstance that doesn't make any sense when just looking at it. You shouldn't be booted out of the playoff, but your seed should be affected. But then again, I also don't think that they should be giving the buys to the automatic seeds. The seeding should just be based off how good the team is.
All right, let's wrap up the show just real quick, Jake. I know you have a couple of concerns with Alabama. There is a logo bias, and what the College Football Playoff Committee is telling us with these rankings. And you make a really good point. I have one counterpoint, and it's not saying that you're wrong. So I don't think that this is going to get contentious anyway. However, I do know you're passionate about what you're about to say.
Well, that's good, because I'm not wrong. First off, because Alabama has no business being in this playoff. This is just, their name is Alabama. Nick Saban's not there anymore, first of all. So if they're going to get the benefit of the doubt if Nick Saban was there, I could at least understand it 2% more than I do now, which is not very much. For you non-math folks out there, but which apparently the committee is in. But I actually think Lane Kiffin has had some points in his tweets lately. Now, it's loser talk because you still lost 3 games, but you're comparing yourself to another 3-loss team. I just don't get why when Bama got blown out by OU, that should have been the end of them. They have looked more inconsistent than any of the other 3-loss teams. South Carolina can't be in, because they lost to both Ole Miss and Alabama. You just can't. If this committee's been consistent on one thing their whole time, it has been head-to-head, which is why Texas was guaranteed in last year the way it worked out, was because we knew they would honor that head-to-head. But I would put, if you're going to put one of these 3, honestly, and this may be unpopular, I would rather see Miami in than Bama.
I was going to ask you what your argument will be if it's not Alabama. I know Ole Miss is there, and I know Miami is there.
Ole Miss would be my pick. they beat Georgia handedly, in a much more convincing fashion than Alabama did.
Yep.
They beat the snot out of South Carolina at South Carolina.
Much more
Yes,
convincing
they
than
lost.
Alabama did.
Yes. And yes, they did lose to LSU, who Alabama scorched. I know that happened. But at that point, you could do the comparison side for Ole Miss more in favor on the other comparable games. And then, so you each, Alabama lost to Tennessee. So I guess that's a good loss because the committee loves saying that. But then they both have bad losses. But Ole Miss, to me, is a better resume when you compare them. Alabama's looked inconsistent the whole season. The Oklahoma game really wasn't that big of a shocker because you knew their offense was capable of just laying a stinker. They looked terrible against South Florida. They looked bad in several of their wins. They lost to Vanderbilt in essentially a home game. Even though it was at Vanderbilt, they got smoked by OU, who Ole Miss also beat, by the way, if you want to keep doing the comparison game. I don't get how Ole Miss is behind South Carolina, too, if I recall the rankings correctly off the top of my head. But I would put in Miami over Alabama. I don't get why Alabama's in, other than the fact that their name is Alabama.
I will say this as an argument, is that, and this is more so, here's what the committee would respond with, is that Alabama's got the 17th ranked strength of schedule, and Ole Miss has like the 35th ranked strength of schedule, and they have the same record against similar common opponents. And Ole Miss has a loss to Kentucky, who had only one win against a Power 4 team all year, and that was against Ole Miss. And so that would be their argument, and that's going to be their argument. Here's kind of where I see just a different outlook on. I don't really want to waste my energy on the last teams in. We knew that there was a possibility with a 3-loss team coming in. I think where we're kind of losing this is like the 12-team playoff was really expanded to favor teams like Florida State, who went undefeated. A Florida State team went undefeated and didn't make the playoffs because they played poorly at the end of the year, and they lost their quarterback at the end of the year, and they were only going to play worse. And then they showed it in their bowl game by getting demolished by a Georgia team who also made a very strong case in their bowl game that they should have been in the college football playoffs to compete for a chance to win a national championship. This just happened last year in the 4-team playoff. So I think the playoffs should, and it kind of does benefit, because we're not really arguing the top 10 teams. We're not really arguing if Indiana should get in, or if SMU should get in, or if Tennessee is a team that should be getting in, or even an Ohio State, who just had an embarrassing loss to their heated rivalry. Everyone's kind of just like, you know what? Yeah, Ohio State should still be in. That's fine. So for the larger picture, for the teams that are whoever gets snubbed out at the 12 spot or the 11 spot, I don't feel bad for you. You win your games. You lost 3 games, you lost 2 games, whatever it is. I don't feel bad for you at this point. And so I think that's kind of the point of view where I'm taking, is like, they're still going to have to earn their way. Alabama, being a 3-loss team, is still going to have to play on the road in round 1 against somebody in the first round. They're still going to have to go on the road and play a playoff caliber team. Then they're going to have to go in the second round on a neutral site and play a better team than them. And then even if they advance past then, they're still going to have to win another game and then a national championship. And so their road to getting to a national championship as a lower seed, when they are a inconsistent, lacking of an offense type team, I think they lose at some point. Now, is it necessarily fair to a team? I don't know what fairness looks like whenever you're including 12 teams into a playoff, but we kind of should have been expecting something like this along the way as we prepared for a 12-team playoff.
Let me devil's advocate your devil's advocate.
Bring it on.
Ohio State, why do they deserve to be in over Miami? They're by far their best win is Penn State. No, yes. They don't have another win that comes close to that.
Correct.
And
if you want to talk about another playoff team, they've beaten 2 playoff teams in Indiana.
Yeah, and Miami has 2 losses yet, and they had sketchy wins. I've called them a fraud many times this year. But just when I look at their schedules, they have a loss to Georgia Tech, who's a pretty good football team, and they have a loss to Syracuse, who's a pretty good football team. Ohio State just lost as 20-point favorites at home against Michigan.
and
they're
Oregon, but they also beat 2 teams that are currently in the playoffs, and they played 3 teams that are in the playoffs.
Indiana. Yeah, the Indiana win escaped me. So
Yeah.
that's fair, but still, it feels like Ohio State, they're kind of getting boosted above what they should be just because of their
They
name.
should have dropped further than 6.
Yeah, they're 6. They're ahead of
Yeah.
Tennessee, SMU. They should be ahead of Indiana. They beat them. They had a tougher schedule
Yes.
than Indiana. But I would put them behind Tennessee and SMU.
Correct. I would too. Yep, that is one thing. That's
And so
another thing that I agree with.
I would rather get rid of the playoff committee and have a similar computer style system to the BCS, take away biases, make it a formula or whatever, and seed the team. I'm fine with automatic bids for conference champions. I think that should matter. But they don't just get a bye just because they won their conference championship. And then you seed the top 12, or it's probably going to go to 16. I think this year confirms it's going to go to 16. Unfortunately, I think it should stay at 12.
I think it should stay at 12.
And then just seed it based off the best teams who are in the field. And they're just seeded based off their rankings in the field.
100%. So, I mean, my thing is your top 4 teams should be the top 4 teams that are rated that way, despite their conference. I mean, if it's 3 SEC teams and 1 Big Ten team, then that's your top 4, and those teams get a bye week that year. That's just is how it is. I don't care. But if you win your conference championship, you should be the highest ranked team within the other teams within your conference in the playoffs, and you should get an automatic bid. Now, if that is a 10 seed, that's a 10 seed. If that's if all your conference champions just happen to be, 5 through 6 or 7, then they don't get a first round bye. Your top ranked teams do. Now, that the likelihood of that happening would probably
zero,
be very slim to none. Right. But that is just kind of the example that we're trying to give here. But anyway, Jake,
it just completely that is sorry, last point on it, just because
but it does take away. Yeah.
It completely screws up the bracket with how it is now. And I think it's because this was created before conference alignment and they didn't really have time to adjust it. They have to adjust it and change it as soon as it is allowed, because this bracket's going to be so screwed up.
It needs to be done in the
whoever's the 5th seed, it just has such an advantage the way this year has unfolded. And it's going to be like that because with 5 conference champions getting in, and let's just be honest, there's really only 2 power conferences. The ACC has a potential to be a 3rd. The Big 12, they deserve a spot in the playoff. They don't deserve to be potentially guaranteed a bye. Arizona State's not a national championship contender.
Yeah.
Like that, just look at the blue chip talent, and that stuff matters. It may not matter every single week in college football, but it matters for winning national championships. The data proves it.
Now, recent history shows that Notre Dame is not capable of winning any type of big game, especially in a national championship or playoff caliber game. But they do not have a potential to ever play a bye game, or they will never have a bye week in this current format. Flip it to where your automatic bids are just in their playoff spot, not necessarily guaranteed a top 4 spot. That would also allow a team like Notre Dame to get a top 4 seed and play for a bye week moving forward as well. So not to try to, should be fair for Notre Dame. They should be punished for not playing in a conference, in my own personal opinion.
Join a freaking conference. Join the Big Ten or the ACC.
Yeah.
Probably the ACC.
The ACC needs
power
it more.
Balance perspective.
But that's kind of where I am too on it, is that, like, not that I will ever apologize for Notre Dame getting shafted, because again, they try to screw up college football by not joining a conference but it would allow them a chance to get a top 4 seed and a bye week if they change the format to what you and I are talking about as well.
Yeah, and it just makes it to where you don't get a bracket where it legit looks better to be a 5 seed than the 1. And we were big proponents of the bye being so important, and I still think it is really important. But I think if the committee went to him, was like, do you want to be the 1 seed and have the bye, or do you want to be the 5 seed? I bet they would go, give us the 5.
I'm halfway tempted to see it'll take a coach like Lane Kiffin to just stick it to the man and play in a conference championship game where they're the 1 seed and they barely lose on purpose. They knee it out, put their
Or they play
backups
their
in.
backups.
Or they just, right. They play their second string guys. They rest their players in the conference championship game, lose that game, play the 5 seed, and work their way to the semifinals almost automatically in a situation like that. It would take a coach like Lane Kiffin to have the balls to do that. We won't see it this year, but I mean, it wouldn't shock you if we ever got to that point, and then that would just tarnish the game of college football. I mean, that would just tarnish what the game that we know and love.
Yeah, luckily, I don't think it'll get to that point because this will be changed for 2026. I think this has to be the format next year. And then I think it's already up for change. They're just doing 2 years of this. They wanted to see how it played out. Conference realignment happened. This will be changed. It's probably going to be expanded. I wish it wasn't expanded. It's probably going to be expanded, but the format style is going to change. And I have no idea what that's going to look like yet.
I don't need to see 16 teams in a
No.
playoff, to be honest with you. But anyway, all right, that's going to do it for this episode. Again, these episodes air Tuesday through Friday at 12 noon. We let the football dictate our schedule on Saturdays. We will give you an immediate reaction following the SEC championship game against Georgia. And then we will have a going into the college football playoff week. And we are excited after that. After this week, Jake, there is no more guaranteed football for the Texas Longhorns following this game against Georgia. Everything else is a win or go home scenario. So we will give you the great content as much as we possibly can. For Jake Jimerson, I'm Tanner Carlson. This is your daily fix for all things Texas Longhorns right here on All In Horns, brought to you by Rogue Sports Network. And as always, welcome.
All in Sports Network. We love sports.